Welcome to Pratidhwani, where we try to humanize science. I'm your host, GV Pawan Kumar. It is my delight, pleasure, and an honor to introduce you to my guest on this particular episode, Dr. Chaitra Redkar. Chaitra actually has been in the academics for a very long time, and she's also a senior faculty member at Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Pune. Prior to that, she also has worked in various capacities as a professor and also an academic in various different institutions. Chaitra, uniquely for Pratidhwani listeners and also the viewers, need to know that she is a social scientist. She has been working on political thought and political science because that is also something I'm very interested to learn about it because there is an element of science in the politics which generally people don't associate. Now, she has been actually doing outstanding work on very interesting topics, very close to my own interest. Gandhism, especially after Gandhi's kind of passing away, and there's a lot of things which have happened since then. And rationalist discourse in modern Maharashtra. Maharashtra has a very rich culture in rational thought, and Chaitra has been also looking at it, and generally speaking also the Indian polity, where she's also interested in looking at the role of women in politics and also various different spheres of democracy. And there's a lot to learn and also understand how she got interested in all these questions. So with this very short introduction, I welcome Chaitra on Pratidwani.
Hello.
Chaitra, please let us know about your origins. Where were you born, and what was the kind of education you had? Because this, for our audience, generally it is people who come from natural sciences, but I'm also very keen and interested in learning about people who come from social science background. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I was born in Kolhapur, but I was brought up in a small village in Ahmednagar district, which is actually currently by one of my field-based study. So I
Wow.
was, yeah, I grew up in a village called Harigaon, which hosts the first sugar factory of Bombay province. And my grandfather went there as first generation employee. My father was also working there. So something which I'm currently working on is social history of sugar, where I'm actually studying this village, where the factory was set up way back in 1924. And because it couldn't compete with the cooperatives, it was shut down in 1988. And that's how we were forced to migrate from that place to Pune. So till class ninth, I studied in that school in the village, and 10th, I was admitted in one of the schools in Pune. And later, my graduation, post-graduation, my PhD, I did from Savitribai Phule Pune University. Of course, that point of time, it was known only as Pune University.
Anyways,
So that's how I came to Pune. Uh,
wonderful, wonderful. So
uh,
this particular association across Maharashtra, I can see the date you've lived different places, and I assume your mother tongue is also Marathi.
yes, my mother tongue is Marathi.
Yeah.
Till class 10th, I learned in Marathi medium. Uh, Also, when we moved to Pune, that was exactly the time when Indian politics was witnessing lots of changes, crucial changes that possibly shaped Indian politics for later 40 years, 30, 40 years. Um, and my father actually is somebody who's keenly interested in reading news. And
Mm.
I remember right from my childhood, I've seen him reading newspapers and various kinds of periodicals, and also would share stories about what's happening in politics. So I have clear memory of having seen India Today's those issues where Bhopal was reported,
Mm.
or where assassination of Indira Gandhi was reported, and all those Raghu Rai pictures. So I've seen all those pictures and stories. Stories, of course, I didn't have that possibly I didn't understand those
Mm,
stories at that point of time, but the visual memories of whatever was happening in Indian politics way back in 84 and onwards is
mm,
something which was very interesting for me. And when we moved to Pune, it was the time when this Ram Janmabhoomi movement Rath Yatra was started. Also, parallelly, we get to see this Bofors and other corruption charges were levied, and there was lots of discussion happening in the Hindu and Indian
mm.
Express. So that was very fascinating for me because my father was reading it and was always sharing those stories with us. So that point of time, my interest was I wanted to become a journalist,
Oh,
and Arun Shourie was my role model at that point of time because he was actually coming up with all the stories in Indian Express. So that's how I decided to take political science in class 11 and 12. That because that was the first time we were introduced to political science. Of course, in CBSE and other boards, political science is introduced much earlier
mm,
from class 8. But here in state boards, we have civics till class
mm.
10. And later, we are introduced to political science. So that was something which was a natural choice. Like, I was not sure what other courses I will take, but I was very keen that I want to
Mm.
opt for political science. So that's kind of
That's
connected with.
fascinating. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. I would actually want to also learn from first principles what political science is. So, for our viewers and listeners, could you please just define what is actually studied in political science? Of course, we'll get into the specific aspect of research, but generally speaking, what is the scientific element related to that?
Yeah, so actually, when I took political science, I chose political science as one of the optional courses. That point of time, my impression was it's about whatever is happening around you,
Mm,
whatever now we understand as electoral politics or party politics. So that was a restricted or limited understanding of politics that I had at that particular point of time. What we actually do in political science is basically try to understand how our collective life is organized, could be organized, what are the structures and processes that would facilitate uh, uh, a better collective life where individual rights are protected, and this balance between individual and collectivity could be managed. So there could be some ideas about organizing our collective life, and also how it's actually organized in reality or historically, something that we call as the understanding of the process, the political process.
mm,
So it could be study of the process, it could be study of political ideas, political philosophy, and this could be right from the local level to the international level. And now, with the perspectives that have been built up by feminism and women's studies, actually, even personal is political. So there is it could be human relations, it could be familiar relations, it could be all the social structures that humans have organized over the years. So that way, we have a very vast scope, and uh, that also contributes a lot to the specialization and super specialization. So possibly somebody who's doing international politics may not be that inclined or that equipped also to study maybe local politics or politics at national level or the state level politics, or somebody who's doing public administration and all kind of administrative processes that take place within country may not be even interested in doing international politics. So
mm,
some kind of super specialization over the years is developed, but at the same time that's more academic.
mm,
The when you actually start studying a particular area, that interconnectedness is something which is always there that you experience. But yes, the way subdisciplines have got developed, that specialization is as a bigger role in shaping them.
Very interesting. So there is a kind of element of systematic study behind the political thought. It can also kind of intertwine with history, economics, and culture, and
Right.
various different interesting things. It also is probably a realm, if I understand correctly, where there's also a lot of demographic related kind of discourse, right? Because it of course connects to anthropology and other kind of questions too, which means that your educational foundation should be reasonably broad in addition to being deep. So how was that part of your kind of experience?
Um, yeah, again, that speaks some that has actually something to do with the specialization you would
Hmm.
end up doing. In my case, because I was more inclined to do philosophy,
Mm.
so my base, in a way, had something to do with philosophy, history, sociology, kind of a base, rather than towards anthropology. And
Mm.
it's not that that part didn't really interest me, but then uh, pursuing my own area, then a couple of critical questions would lead me to that direction and I would explore them. But since my area remained to be philosophy, and so something that I'm doing currently is more interface of philosophy and history and politics,
Politics.
rather than yeah, except for the one field based study, and which is more kind of connected with my personal experiences, and also connected with what I've done and thought. But um, so I'll talk about it later, that how
Later,
it's
yeah, yeah.
actually connected with my
Correct.
study.
Yeah.
But apart from that field-based study, which also requires me to understand economics and the issues related to climate change and developmental studies,
Nice.
which has never been my very central to
Mm. Okay.
my work. But that's a new opening in my study, which is I'm currently doing.
Wonderful, wonderful. In fact, that interface of history, philosophy, and politics is a very, very fascinating area, because it gives, rather, it goes beyond the day-to-day affairs of politics, and probably connects it to its deeper roots, if I am correct. And that is
Right.
so important, right? Because many times people are at least a general reading of politics is that it is very, very happening right now, but there is a huge amount of history, philosophy behind all those things.
Exactly, exactly. Actually, the journey towards this area of work also happened with similar kind of developments taking place uh, around me. As
Mm.
I mentioned, like this was the time when the Indian politics was changing
Yeah.
its character, and then there were some intriguing questions which uh, I was I found very significant towards my completion of my graduation.
Mm.
That what is it that promises something called Ram Rajya, because Ram Rajya was the word,
Mm.
and which I knew acquired coinage. Of course, that was the word which Gandhi had used earlier. But then this was again the time when, in a very different context, that word was in circulation.
Insufficient.
So, what would Ram Rajya actually mean? And had people, or had particularly those who were active in politics in 19th and 20th century in India, did they reflect on what would be the ideal, if not Ram Rajya, if somebody is not using that word, but what would be an ideal polity and what would be an ideal society? That was a question which I actually wanted to pursue at that particular point of time. And for whatever reason, but I was kind of made to believe that the answers possibly one can find in ancient India. So my initial interest was in ancient India, but uh, I also realized that I'm not equipped to study ancient India because I don't know Sanskrit,
Mm.
and whatever is available in English, again, the translator would have uh, own role in translating it. Besides what texts are translated, I need to know some history of the Sanskrit literature
Mm.
to make sense of what kind of text actually I'm engaging into. So all that thinking, all that reflections happened towards the close of graduation, and when I joined Pune University to do my post graduation. And then there came a realization that modern India is actually as interesting, or rather more interesting, than possibly ancient and medieval India could be. Of course, that also has lots of potentials to explore. But modern India was like more close, and
Mm.
the issues that were addressed were again, I found more contemporary. And that's how my work started in this area, modern Indian political thought.
Wonderful. That's a very fascinating kind of, lineage, so to speak. Also, it means that, this aspect of going back to ancient languages, including Sanskrit and also non-Sanskrit based bases, also has a very deep connection to the culture and other things. As you correctly mentioned, a lot of scriptures written are unfortunately not kind of interpretable in the modern day. It's a factor to be really, bit worried and also a bit unfortunate, right? There is information there, but we don't have the complete knowledge to
Right.
kind of bring it out in its completeness. The other point I want to also ask is, what was the kind of upbringing, Chaitra, you had at your home, and also the kind of education you had? Please give us a picture of that foundation, what you got, because it's very important for us to know what it takes to become a social scientist, and it's a good thing for us to learn about it.
Yeah. So my parents, my father was a manufacturing chemist in the sugar factory at Haregaon, and my mother, for the time, like till the time we were in Haregaon, she was a homemaker. But what happened in Haregaon when it got closed in 87, 88, and rather the entire year 1987 was very disturbing, because this factory was shut down and the entire village kind of lost jobs, and the entire village had to migrate. So that point of time we shifted to Pune, and both parents were looking for jobs, because at the age when it's very difficult to find new jobs, they were in their 40s and they were looking for new jobs. So in their 40s they actually found something, and they were very keen that other things could be taken care of whatever way, but we should get good education. I have a younger brother, so both of us should get good education. One interesting thing which I now, particularly after doing social sciences, I felt like, I don't know how, but they had some kind of a secular perspective. They never, we had certain, we used to practice some rituals at home, but never really forced any ideas on us. Neither did they have any kind of uh, do's and don'ts regarding like the social customs or culturally or about interacting with people. Also, the village where I lived for 14 years of my life was also some kind of a multicultural kind of a place. Church had a major role in that. There was a church in that village and had a major role. And something which possibly people would find like too ideal to be real, but that kind of a cultural interactions were very common in that place. And I do feel that upbringing in that village and by these parents possibly created some kind of convictions about the democratic values and the secular values, because it was not part of my academic study but part of my life right from childhood. So that certainly had its role. Besides, they never really forced me to choose one particular career path, whatever I want to do. Like the only thing that my mother told me when I decided to do post graduation was that it's master's degree, so you need to have mastery on whatever you do. Apart from that, they actually didn't have anything else to tell. So whatever uh, career path that I wanted to choose, or the job that I took up in Mumbai, or the research area, they were happy in whatever both of us were doing. Um, so that was one thing. But when I look back about my journey as a social scientist, uh, my supervisor, who actually later became my supervisor, but first he was my teacher at my postgraduate courses, like all of them who were there, but one particular person who later became my supervisor, Professor Suman, whom we lost about 10 years back. He has a very significant role on my career choices, and also my perspective to rather my worldview. He has a very crucial role. He was somebody uh, who had a particular vision about political science and social sciences, and also the role the social scientists are uh, supposed to play in a developing society. And he had a profound impact on all his students. And I too owe a lot to what I am today uh, is much because of the way he helped us to, or rather introduced us to many aspects, not just of social sciences, but about society. It could be literature, it could be philosophy, it could be social movements. But the kind of connect that he tried to build between academics and society was something which I feel that provided with a very different perspective to most of us who work with him.
Very interesting. Very interesting. That always is very crucial, right? Because the kind of discourse you have while you're kind of learning the subject intertwines very nicely with the general worldview what you have. This is same across various different disciplines, and I also found this common among many people from various different areas
True.
of research. One element I wanted to ask is that see, there is a way to approach political science, or even for that matter, politics, through an activism approach. But there's also an element of approaching these questions from an academic viewpoint. Uh, if I understand correctly, you belong to the second part, where you also are interested in a lot of issues and other things. Uh, but how does one kind of, discriminate between these two viewpoints? Or rather, is there a very difficult kind of situation where you can't demarcate between them? How should one kind of look at it? Because an objective aspect is also equally important when you're studying the topic.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's something which is kind of a dilemma at times one faces. Um, uh, both these dimensions could be mutually compatible, but it also depends on how one anchors himself or herself in this. Because when you are engaged with a movement and some kind of activism, uh, there would be some kind of requirements, and these requirements address mostly the mobilizational issues
Mhm,
and also the issues pertaining to interacting with the state.
mhm,
There are always these threats that the state will co-opt these movements, or will kind of bypass these movements. Also, the way politics as it evolved in American universities,
mhm,
even when it took note of the interactions that politics has, or the roots that the politics has in society and various social aspects, the way society was understood was doesn't necessarily reflect this activism dimension, because it
Dimension.
was
Yeah.
understood more in terms of the formal groups, the formal structures that exist in society. So moving from there to the kind of activism that takes place in society, which neither the academics nor the state is very keen to look at sympathetically, rather seen more as some kind of anomic tendencies, or tendencies that would be disturbing for maintaining law and order, or rather creating troubles for the constitutional process. So on the one hand, you have this kind of an understanding of the of the movements. The movements, on the other hand, would want you to deliver in a certain way, and as academician, you may not want to cater to what the movement expects you to do,
Mm.
even when you are sympathizer of the movement,
Moment.
because
Yeah.
as a scholar, as a researcher, you get a different perspective, um, uh, just because you are connected and still can have some kind of a bird's eye view to
I
look
view.
at whatever is happening. So that's a difficult choice, and I think each individual case one has to kind of handle differently. But one thing which I learned, and over the period I'm actually trying
Mm.
to develop, is that if you're writing in Indian languages simultaneously when you're contributing to academic journals, it really facilitates you to maintain that balance, because the audience to whom you are speaking, they are different. And while writing it, you are able to gather your thoughts more
Thoughts.
clearly, and also the issues that the people from movement are addressing, you can engage with those issues while you are writing. So that helps in building perspective. Also, it helps in working on your language, uh,
Mm.
because at times your academics kind of overpowers your entire work in such a way that you end up becoming too jargonized. But what is very essential, and particularly, I think it's true for social sciences, but it's true for everybody who's engaged in knowledge creation, that whatever we do should be made available to the people at large, and should not be restricted only to the academic circles. And one best way of doing it is to write in your mother tongue, your the other language that you know, and that's something which I have been doing, and that's like very
Yeah.
dear to me.
I have to mention to the listeners and the viewers that Chaitra actually is a bilingual author. So she not only writes, of course, scholarly discourse in English, but also in Marathi, right? Chaitra,
Yeah,
you are right. Is there any other language you also write in other than English and Marathi?
I tried in Hindi, but
Uh,
I like I couldn't write very good Hindi. I also tried learning Gujarati, so
Nice.
I can read Gujarati.
Yeah, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, but like I don't have the confidence to
Correct.
speak in Gujarati. I also tried learning Urdu, but then I realized, like, for a very long time I'm stuck at the
Same
beginner's
level.
level.
This is very fascinating. This is something I've also been mentioning on this particular platform. Uh, it's not only about the science, because any kind of exposition, if it is not done in a language which is very commonly kind of discussed in everyday life. For example, you go out into the street in Pune. Of course, people understand Hindi, but that Marathi is the connecting language, right? Because my own mother tongue is Kannada, but I also see that when I learn and also talk a little bit in Marathi, the effect is very different. it's not that people want you to do it, but the connection you kind of draw is completely,
True.
different. Now, even an auto wala or a sabzi wala or anybody would actually be very comfortable, in the
Do
fact
you
that you
write?
are Kannada. In fact, most of the things what we do in science, in fact, that is one thing I would really want to, encourage a lot of people. In my own case, most of the stuff what I do has been in English, but it would be great to actually, diversify into other Indian languages. And I'm
Yeah.
actually banking on artificial intelligence. Hopefully, that is one application I'm really, really, very interested about, because it can really be a game changer. Because if
Yeah.
you can really make your thoughts very concrete in English, and then make sure that the translation and transliteration happens properly in other languages, that would actually be wonderful in that sense.
Yeah.
So writing in two languages would also kind of bring in its own vocabulary. How do you manage that? Of course, there is also a distinction between academic and non-academic, and here we have to also distinguish between English and Marathi. So how do you generally balance that?
One thing is, like when I'm writing in Marathi, as I said, like for uh, 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 both the languages, uh, the audience is different. In English, I haven't really tried writing for a popular kind
Hmm.
of forum. English has mostly been academic writing,
Writing, yeah.
whereas in Marathi, it's both. I know my audience. I know the debate that's taking place
Hmm.
uh, for the in the on the forum for which I'm writing. So that kind of helps in addressing the issues as well as working on language.
Languages.
I can avoid using more technical terms when I'm writing on popular forums, and at times something that I've experienced is like maybe when I start writing the first draft or couple of uh, uh, pages in the beginning, at times whatever I write is like very difficult. The language is not very friendly. But then once that like the flow comes, then possibly I work again the first part, change couple of words or uh, the very construction of the argument over there. But it's mostly just when the start writing with flow, things change, and then the beginning when I'm actually struggling to put the argument on paper, that point of time the language is uh, even I don't like reading my own language at that point of time.
Yeah, but it's very interesting, because I'm always kind of intrigued by that process of getting the thoughts. Because see, ultimately one will have to first also kind of realize some process. Uh, that process actually then gets converted into words, and therefore the ideas actually are there. Yeah. But the transformation of ideas into words, and sometimes you do also get ideas while in the process of expressing your ideas. So tell us a little bit about your writing process itself, because that is something which I we as science and students and scientists are do it slightly differently, because the way we write also is very sometimes data driven. Of course, we also write other kind of forms, but most of the stuff which is written in scientific literature is from, let's say, a data viewpoint. You ask a question and then build something from that particular question and data. I want to also know how social scientists and generally humanities people do kind of approach this particular process.
Yeah. So in fact, this is also data driven. So data
Mm.
is a different kind.
Yeah, yeah, you're
Uh,
right.
and you access that data through a very different process. But so some data could be whatever is published in that particular
Mm.
area, and to that you are possibly either you are confirming that argument or you are critiquing that position. So that process, in fact, starts when you are reading something which is related to the
Into-
work that you have undertaken. Also, the work that I've been doing, as I said, in political thought, which is again history, philosophy, political science
Mm, mm,
interface. History is something which provides me lots of data, and what I've been using is something called historical contextualism,
mm,
where because this was a very critical question when I started looking at Indian political thought, that how do I approach the Indian thinkers. So before I come to this discussion on writing, I think I'll
yeah,
address this so that it
yeah,
will help
yeah.
me to talk more
Please,
about writing.
please, yeah, please.
So, for instance, if I'm reading Jyotiba Phule,
Mm,
and there are lots of works on Phule that have already taken place. So, somebody would present Phule as a radical liberal. Somebody would present him as having some potentials for cultural revolt. But when you are making sense of Phule as
mm,
either as radical liberal or as having potentials for cultural revolt, there's some kind of a framework that you're using for the ideas that he expressed. Now, the concern that I have is the ideas that are presented in a culturally and materially different context. Why is it necessary to make sense of those ideas in a framework which came up in, again, a culturally and materially very different kind of a context? It's not that that context doesn't help us in making sense, but do we need to use them as parameters? Like, can we read Phule differently? Um, can we read Ranade differently? Because, for instance, like Ranade had influence of liberalism, but he was also somebody who engaged in medieval bhakti tradition. So there are various sources, there are various arguments which the people in this area, not
mm,
just
mm,
in this subcontinent, but elsewhere, apart from the continents, apart from European land, we do get to see that they have their own material context. Um, they experience capitalism differently because it was through colonialism that they were introduced to capitalism. So, taking into consideration these factors, how do we make sense of the ideas that are expressed over here? And what is political in these ideas? Like, do we need to make sense of political exactly the way it was understood in the Greek context, in the
mm.
the context of European modernity, or is there anything else that we can find out here? Uh, uh, so that is something which was some kind of a concern with which uh, I started engaging myself, and this led me to a perspective called historical contextualism, where I try to see the people with whom the thinker under my study is actually engaged with,
Mm.
and how the person is interacting intellectually with the other people. What are the positions that are taken by the people of his or her time, and what evolves from this interaction. Now, when I have these kinds of various contexts in mind, the same applies when I'm writing, that even I have my own context. And so basically, my data starts coming from there, that first of all, other people have also engaged with the with the ideas on which I'm working. They have accessed these ideas from certain ideological position, or have interpreted these ideas into certain conceptual frameworks. So my journey actually starts from there, that what is my reflection on this, what are the sources that they have used to come to this conclusion, what different sources I can use, and how differently can I engage with these sources. um, what I have tried to do in my the works that I've done so far is some kind of political biography of um, these personalities,
Mm.
has helped me in making sense of their ideas in totality. So when I'm writing there's some reflection which has already started building while engaging with the sources. Um, uh, for instance, the political biography of Sani Guruji that I wrote. No, Sani Guruji was already known to Maharashtra, but he was known more as a children's writer, and his political career is something which people rather didn't pay much attention to. It's not that it wasn't completely unknown to people, but no serious work was done. And what basically prompted him to engage into politics in a particular way is something which was not known. So when I started working, one aspect certainly was to reflect on the existing biographies on Sani Guruji that have actually belittled his political engagement. So that rather, I realized after a while that that's kind of guiding me, or that's rather forcing me to react to what is not being done. And so actually, on a second draft, I kind of had to a little bit. I had to was work. I was required to work on that part where I was like being excessively critical on the existing biographies that had actually belittled the political part. But then that came as a very natural reaction. Like, look at this man. That and that I think comes when you are engaging yourself with uh, multiple sources. Like in case of Sani Guruji, I got access to his private correspondence, his diaries, um, apart from the published work, and that provided a very different perspective to look at the man. So I think the process when you are collecting data, that point of time itself, that the what you are writing gets built in your mind. Uh, Putting it on paper, of course, is a struggle till you are able to actually get what exactly you want to put on paper. But I think once that you find, then it flows, and at least that's something which I've experienced. Like when I find it, then it's even at times like I'm surprised, like in such a short span of time I'm able to put everything on paper. But till I find that, though those reflections are there, and those reflections are there at times for a very long time, right from the first source that you have access. But somehow, uh, to find it, the exact words and the language is a struggle.
Yeah. So, so it means that you also do a lot of research before writing, or you do simultaneously? How is your general process?
Mostly it's done before I
Before,
start writing.
yeah.
Rather, for me, it has been really very difficult to satisfy myself and take a decision that I've seen sufficient sources and now I can start writing. It's kind of, I keep feeling that maybe I should see this part also, or there could be something more. And possibly, like I mentioned, like my supervisor, we lost him about 10 years back. So I actually feel that vacuum on such moments, because he was somebody who would push, like, you've seen sufficient data, now start writing.
That's
that
a
you need somebody to.
yeah, that's a perennial problem actually for scholars, including when we write. Because I also like to write a little bit more on the history of science aspect of it. You always are trying to balance between the research what you do and also putting it and committing it on the paper. So tell us a little bit more about the questions you have been involved in addressing or interested in through this period of your masters and PhD. What are the kind of questions you were asking, and what really were your influences, literature influences, and also even geographical, and also maybe you already mentioned your advisor, Suman. Are there any other people whom you also interacted a bit?
Yeah. Uh, uh, Certainly, I feel Maharashtra as a region has a long tradition, like intellectual tradition. There's a very complex kind of presence of even contradictory forces, intellectual ideas are there. But intellectual history of modern Maharashtra is something which I kind of locate myself in that
Mm.
tradition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and this tradition also has some kind of a syncretic approach. Over the period, what I get to see is that there have been attempts where people have very seriously tried to bring together two or more different uh, streams of thought. So, if we look at, let's say, early 20th century, we have somebody called Acharya Zavdekar who
Mm.
uh, constructed a concept called Satyagrahi Samajwad, where he tries to bring together Gandhi and Marx.
Mm.
Something similar we come across in Sani Guruji also, where
Guruji.
he's uh, like simultaneously reflecting on nationalism and communism,
Mm.
and that's a dilemma that he's actually facing, how to engage with Gandhi and Marx simultaneously. More recently, we have somebody called Sharat Patil who came up with a idea of Marxwad Phule Ambedkarwad, Mafua is popularly
Mm.
known, where he tries to bring together Marx, Phule, and Ambedkar. So that syncretic uh, perspective, and not necessarily merging different perspectives, but
Mm.
bringing various ideas into dialogue with each other, something which I feel is ethos of this intellectual tradition of this region. So somewhere I think I feel connected with that, or I feel like that's my calling. Uh, uh, yeah, so
Wonderful.
that's
So nice, so nice. In fact, I'm actually one of the main things which drives me to do even this kind of podcasting and other things is actually intellectual history, because in sciences we generally uh, uh, we are sometimes oblivious, because we do use a lot of intellectual history in science, as any field, of course. We sometimes don't pay attention to either the origins. We do sometimes pay attention to the origins, but not to the evolution of the subject. And whereas historians and philosophers and others do this in a systematic way, and it's a very fascinating thing. These are also a kind of expositions which are very important, right? Because it would give you a very broad viewpoint, and also give you a great level field to really explore so many questions, like bringing people from different thoughts together. I know that you have also written a very nice book on Gandhiism and kind of economics related to JC Kumarappa and other aspects of it. Would you also want to tell how it came about?
yeah. So Gandhism again was one of the area which I wanted to explore, and I was finding out someone from the Gandhian tradition where people haven't engaged much with. So there are like still many more about whom we really don't know, and I'm working currently on one such person called Dhiren Majumdar. But
Mhm.
my engagement with J.C. Kumarappa started with this very idea that why Kumarappa remained an ignored figure in the Gandhian tradition. Because Kumarappa was very much there till 1960. He died in 1960.
Mm.
So till Gandhi was assassinated, we get to see Kumarappa in it's a kind of having a central role in organizing all the economic activities at Wardha. He was organizing
Mm.
secretary of All India Village Industries Association,
Mm.
and regularly in contact with Gandhi. Like we get to see lots of letters that Gandhi has written to him, and he has written to Gandhi, and all those kinds of things. And suddenly you get to know about him around his birth centenary year.
Mm.
So 42, then maybe till 50, 52, you hear about him, and then he's still there for the 7, 8 years, he's still alive. But nobody talks about him, and directly you get to hear about him way back sometime in 1992. So
Mm.
that kind of made me curious to know more about him. And then I started working on him, and that point of time, there wasn't much written on him. Now, of course, there are a couple of more books written on Kumarappa. But when I started with a small biography written by one of his associate, and he was a Tamil Christian,
Mm.
a
Oh,
chartered accountant, trained chartered
chartered
accountant,
accountant. Yeah.
and didn't know much about Gandhi till almost 1928, when he also did post graduation in economics and a course in business administration. And he wanted to publish his postgraduate thesis, and somebody suggested him to contact Gandhi. And that's how he meets Gandhi in 1928. And Gandhi offers him to join him in Gujarat Vidyapeeth and also
Mm.
conduct one survey, and then he's like completely transformed. He leaves his practice, his whatever flourishing career that he has, and then he joins Gandhi and he works with him to develop his economic ideas. And he's written a lot, and a very disciplined person. Like in his private papers kept at Nehru Memorial Library, I also like came across very interesting comments on whatever committee meetings that he attended, and so lots of literature I could find, and that's somehow I started working on Kumarappa, and that, as I mentioned, like my entire curiosity about the lesser known Gandhians
Mm.
um, started from my engagement with Kumarappa, which of course later I published. So, Gandhian engagement with capital,
Capital.
perspectives
Yes.
of Kumarappa.
Fascinating. Fascinating to know about this. So, all this kind of time, what is the rationale of your choice of these questions? Is it also sometimes the exposition and also the exposure to new literature and new sources, or you also have a kind of specific kind of agenda you have in terms of the questions what you're interested in?
Uh, One concern is uh, uh, what kind of strategy one uses to read history and
Mm.
intellectual history or history of ideas. Um, whatever kind of perspectives that have come up in recent times, and recent when I'm saying is about 30, 40 years, whatever perspectives that have come up could be various hermeneutic strategies, it could be various ways of engaging with political thought, the conceptual trajectories that one uses or the hermeneutic strategies that one uses, um, they have focused more on interpreter's location or interpreter's choices. And I do know the dilemmas in claiming for objectivity, or myself would problematize uh, objectivity.
Mm.
But
Mm.
despite that, what I want is that can there be some kind of authentic reading of the text?
Mm.
Um, and where I'm not aspiring for objectivity, but at the same time, I want to understand the ideas in totality. So before I use more contemporary frameworks to interpret the ideas, like people have done in case of Gandhi, but I do feel that somebody who has produced so much of literature without really exploring what the person has
Mm.
written, without really engaging with his works, um, just interpreting one single text for whatever is relevant for your times, uh, possibly could lead to some kind of misinterpretation. It
Interesting.
could uh, it could serve your political purpose. It could serve the purpose of mobilization. It could serve the purpose of developing critique. and it could have some kind of a glamour also.
Mm.
And because at times when people are coming up with sympathetic reading, they could be brushed aside, saying that this you're just producing some kind of hagiographic accounts.
Mm. Mm.
Uh, but there is a thinner line between hagiographies and a more authentic reading of the text. And I feel like without doing that, uh, interpretations are like could be serving your academic interests or academic careers, but um, do grave injustice to the figure you are engaging with.
Engagement.
So the way I have been engaging and the people whom I'm working or the ideas that I'm engaging myself with, I'm working with this perspective, and that's possibly is like too time consuming also, because if you want to read the entire body of work produced by that person, besides you also want to know the biographic details of that person. That's a bit time consuming at times. All the sources are not available. So certainly that's high demand on time, but it's fun and it requires some kind of archival work
Work
also.
also, yeah.
So I personally enjoy, and like even a tiny piece of paper throws so much of light on the personality and solves all your questions that have been troubling you for a very
Yeah.
long time. So that's fun and
Absolutely,
doing this.
absolutely. In fact, there's a great joy in doing that kind of, in-depth research, going after resources, and really, it might be hiding in some kind of, dust bowl, but you would have to really go and extract that particular thing. Uh, Tell us a little bit about the kind of questions you are now interested in. What is the kind of program you have, and what is the kind of problems you are kind of looking at, both in terms of the intellectual history of people, especially the rationalism aspect, also something you have started and you've been
Right.
interested in,
Yes.
and that is a topic of very high interest to me too. In fact, in addition to whatever you've already spoken.
Yeah.
So please tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the projects that I'm working on right now, one project, as I said, is related to the social history of sugar,
Mm,
which is a field-based study. But it started not simply because of my personal association with Harigao.
mm,
That, of
mm,
course, is certainly there at the back of my mind all the time, all these years, after I left. But there was one article which Kumarappa had written way back in 1946 as a critique of uh, India's economic policy, the economic policy of the interim government, and where he had expressed his apprehensions about starting sugar factories, even as cooperative sugar factories.
mm,
And the issues that he had raised actually are the issues which I found uh, people are facing in more recent times. And that made me think that I need to take this up, that not just at the level of ideas, the kind of critique, or not just at the level of the intellectual biography of a person, but the issues that somebody has raised, what happens to those concerns um, uh, 50 years, 70 years down the line. And that's why it's a field-based kind of a study, which I'm doing. Other aspects is there are certain ideas which particularly Gandhi and Gandhians have expressed in building alternate models of development, alternate models of democracy.
mm.
So that's my another concern, that at times they worked on it to build it into a model. At times they just threw certain fascinating ideas, but didn't really worked on them as to develop a model. But later, some other people took those ideas and tried to build models. So right now, I'm exploring those, that can there be alternate ways of economic development, alternate ways of democracies, because whatever uh, issues that we are facing, of course, the existing models are also trying to resolve, have their
Resolve.
own ways of addressing those concerns. in democracy or in development. But can there be alternate ways of addressing these issues? Is one of the concern that um, that's central to various research questions that I'm right now addressing in my uh, thought-based studies and field-based studies. As far as the work on rationalism is concerned, that's still at a very early stage. But certainly, one thing that I faced is
As far as the work on rationalist traditions in modern Maharashtra is concerned, that's still at the early stage of exploration. Um, One thing which I felt is one needs to distinguish between the positivist kind of positions and rationalism. Uh, at times, rationalism is equated with positivism.
Mm.
Um, and what my initial impression is that the four figures that I've identified in terms of modern Maharashtra, um, I feel like I would be able to uh, mm, address the difference that evolves from various shades of rationalism,
Yes,
which is where you are not equating it with positivist kind of an approach. So
so
that's
what do you mean by positivist? And also the four people, if you can tell who are the ones who are you are working on.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Looking for evidence um, to accept something as a scientific truth um, could be a, a very simplified way of possibly defining positivism. But when we want to practice rationalism or cherish rationalism as an ideal um, for any society, whether one can um, buy this idea of rationalism, where something pro proving with evidence is equated with rationalism. So that something that I called as positivism
Hmm.
um, is not to be equated with rationalism. And what other ways one can find of um, bringing in rational thinking in uh, in your practice, in your thinking, in your life, and as a social goal. So people that I've identified are Gopal Ganesh Agarkar,
Hmm.
late 19th century, uh, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, uh, Savarkar. Savarkar
Yes.
also was a
Yeah.
rationalist.
Yes. Yes.
And a more recent person would be Dr. Narendra Dabodkar.
Dabholkar. Nice.
Um,
Nice. Fabulous, fabulous. In fact, all these four people have deeply influenced not only just Maharashtra, but also to a large extent even the thought process in India and even outside India to in a very very interesting way. It's also very fascinating for me to learn about the interest what you have because one of the things which is I strongly urge people to look up Chaitra's Facebook page, especially when there is some specific kind of cultural events like the Palke which actually goes through Pune. Chaitra really captures the essence of the social life of people there, especially the cultural aspect of it. It's one of the most fabulous aspects. She's a
Thank
fantastic
you.
photographer, and I would strongly urge you to just have a look at some of the things what she generally puts out, not only during the events but also even other times. How did you get interested in those aspects, Chaitra? Because that's actually one of the fascinating elements of probably and not only your research, but as a person itself, right? I assume that comes deep down from that particular place.
Yeah, I just love I love photography. I like watching photographs, good
Mm.
photography. And like with this camera coming in your cell phone,
Cell phone.
that's the best thing that has happened. Uh, because then you can actually capture so much of your routine daily life,
Right.
and that has lots of drama and lots of interesting things. It basically started in Mumbai because
Mm.
Mumbai actually provides you with a lot more variety than what you
Yeah,
get
yeah,
here in Pune.
yeah, yeah,
Also, Pune also, but then in Mumbai, it was kind of part of your routine life.
yeah.
Because just by traveling by a local train, you get to see so much. And also because you are not driving, so your hands are free to take photos.
Yes,
Here
yes,
it becomes an event, like you all the way have to go out from
yeah.
the campus with this, which I actually now I've started doing. In the beginning,
Nice.
I felt sorry that I'm not able to get good photographs here, but then I felt that I need to deliberately plan for it, and so that I do sometimes. But yeah, I enjoy and I'm not a trained photographer. I
Yeah,
tried to take training, but I somehow felt like that's not working with me, possibly.
yeah.
Not very open to learn new things. Whatever I know, possibly I'll just go ahead with that. So it's like amateurish, only for purely for my own joy.
Joy. No,
But
but
yeah.
I've seen many of them because especially during the cultural events, you do put it, and you need somebody to have a trained eye to really capture that moment. It may not actually be coming from a technical viewpoint, but it is coming from a social viewpoint. Because you don't know what to see, right? Yeah, a photographer also has to know what to see and then capture it, and that actually is already making you a good photographer, because if you know what to really see, that is important.
Actually, I have an Instagram account,
Ah, ah.
and like very few from that I post on Facebook. It's like
Oh, is it? Then I should then follow that account. I should
so it was
really.
actually more than a like I was told like Instagram is meant for teenagers.
Yeah.
But then like I was active more than a teenager on my Insta account. So,
No, no, I did not know that. I'll definitely go in search of it, and yeah, that is something which is very, very fascinating. Uh, so we come almost towards the conclusion. So please tell us a little bit about your kind of plans, which in the short and the medium term you have on going also forward. Now, what are the kind of things what you're working on? What are the questions you have been interested in?
yeah, one thing, of course, as I mentioned, this
Yeah.
rationalism project is still in
Mm,
the it's just started working on it, and it's again going to take some time before I engage fully, before I finish
mm,
with my Harigaon project. And so that's one thing. Then other thing is Gandhism after Gandhi is like,
mm,
again, there's lots of potential in exploring that. Dhiren Majumdar is one figure I'm right now started like identifying the sources that I can
mm,
check out and sing. But there are a couple of others which I would want to engage with. So Gandhism after Gandhi is certainly on the plate, and that's something which I think is going to stay like till I possibly retire, because
okay.
there's so much to explore. So parallelly, that stream will continue. But after taking up this field-based project, I found the fun of engaging in
Mm,
more empirical kind of studies. There are a couple of ideas which possibly I'll start exploring with field-based work. For instance, this ongoing concern about the education in regional mediums is
mm,
always
mm,
there at the back of my mind. So, with some hard data, possibly, I would be able to come up with something interesting. That's what I feel. Not actually directly related with what I'm doing currently,
mm,
but
mm,
that's
mm.
some kind of a concern. And possibly I feel that my field-based studies are going to come up from my concern rather
Yes.
than
Yeah.
uh, from the academic and intellectual kind of
English.
work that I'm doing. But possibly that's something if I'm able to do parallelly, that to be able to engage with two different um, areas, that would be really great. That actually keeps you moving, and it's very enriching personally, because the kind of insights that you get from one are also helpful to make sense of something which is seemingly unrelated with your one kind of a work, but still it's very insightful.
It's a very important point what you mentioned, because the internal motivation is so critical when one is really, doing research, and if you want to really have a long-term commitment to problems, that motivation is very, very important. So, Chaitra, it has been really wonderful, to
Thank you,
learn.
Pawan. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's very illuminating, and also there's a lot of learning for us to do, because people who work in natural sciences generally don't have the complete view of how humanities and social sciences work. And I assume it is the other way around also, it's correct sometimes. No, but for me, at least, as a person who comes from a
Yeah, I
science,
actually, like you are concluding, but still, I must say that, like, my first 21 years of work, and then I'm here just for 5 years at
yeah,
IISER. But certain, like, working here is enriching for, like, more than one way, because, like, so many new ideas are
yes,
coming
yes.
up. And also, I've left science long, long back. But now I feel that when I'm engaging with science students, like, I should uh, at least see my old textbooks, at least uh, uh, to be able, like, to make sense to them, like what I'm saying, or the framework in which they are operating, at least I should know. But
Yeah.
also newer things are, like, coming up while I'm working, and there are certain, I may not be able to articulate them at,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
this early stage, but this certainly, it has been very enriching, that I shifted from the conventional universities to
Too.
IISER and interact with more interdisciplinary kind of fields that are coming up.
Yeah, that's the whole point about the concept of university is that, I assume, right? Because there's such a large scope for learning. Need not be just only in the classroom. Like, even the kind of discussion we have, even over online forums, it will still be actually illuminating and enriching. So I again thank you a lot for your time and thoughts, Chaitra. I also urge you to actually have a look at her work. I'll of course link her webpage and other details, including the fabulous book which she has written. And I would urge you to go and read, and also explore the future aspects of what yeah, Chaitra has done. There's also a lot of interesting talks and other things which happen as part of humanities section in IISER Pune, and Chaitra is heading that particular department now. And I would urge you to also check a lot of announcements which come out of the department. And there's a lot of interesting work going on in the department. And Chaitra actually is at the center of many of the things which are happening. So, Chaitra, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for being here. And this is Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science, this time with the one and the only Chaitra Redkar. Thank you, Chaitra. Thank you.
Thanks.